I'm reading a book called The Righteous Mind. The author is Jonathan Haidt. Jonathan is the Thomas Cooley Professor of Ethical Leadership at New York University's Stern School for Business. He obtained his PhD in social psychology from the University of Pennsylvania in 1992 and then taught at the University of Virginia until 2011. He is the author of the Happiness Hypothesis, Finding Modern Truths in Ancient Wisdoms, and the co-editor of Flourishing Positive Psychology and The Life Well Lived. He lives in New York City. The Righteous Mind. Okay. Why good people are divided by politics and religion. He starts with a quote from Spinoza. I have striven not to laugh at human actions, not to weep at them, not to hate them, but to understand them. Spinoza said that in his Tractatus Politicus, 1676. Part 1. The title is Intuitions Come First, Strategic Reasoning Second. And this is an introduction. Can we all get along? That appeal was made famous on May 1st, 1992 by Rodney King, a black man who had been beaten nearly to death by 4 Los Angeles police officers a year earlier. The entire nation had seen a videotape of the beating. So when a jury failed to convict the officers, their acquittal triggered widespread outrage and 6 days of rioting in Los Angeles. 53 people were killed and more than 7,000 buildings were torched. Much of the mayhem was carried live. News cameras tracked the action from helicopters circling overhead. After a particularly horrific act of violence against a white truck driver, King was moved to make his appeal for peace. King's appeal is now so overused that it has become cultural kitsch. Catchphrase is more often said for laughs than as a serious plea for mutual understanding. I therefore hesitated to use King's words as the opening line of this book, but I decided to go ahead for 2 reasons. The first is because most Americans nowadays are asking King's question not about race relations, but about the political relations and the collapse of a corporation across party lines. Many Americans feel as though the nightly news from Washington is being sent to us from helicopters circling over the city, delivering dispatches from the war zone. The second reason I decided to open this book with an overused phrase is because King followed it up with something lovely, something rarely quoted. As he stumbled through his television interview, fighting back tears and often repeating himself, he found these words: please, we can get along here. We can all get along. I mean, we're all stuck here for a while. Let's try to work it out. This book is about why it's so hard for us to get along. We are indeed all stuck here for a while. So let's at least do what we can to understand why we are so easily divided into hostile groups, each one certain of its righteousness. People who devoted their lives to studying something often come to believe that the object of their fascination is the key to understanding everything. Books have been published in recent years on the transformative role in human history played by cooking, mothering, war, even thought. This is one of those books. I study moral psychology, and I'm going to make the case that morality is the extraordinary human capacity that made civilizations possible. I don't mean to imply that cooking, mothering, war, and thought were not also necessary, but in this book, I'm going to take you on a tour of human nature and history from the perspective of moral psychology. By the end of the tour, I hope to have given you a new way to think about two of the most important, vexing, and divisive topics in human life: politics and religion. Adequate books tells us not to discuss these topics in polite company. But I say go ahead. Politics and religion are both expressions of our understanding moral psychology, and an understanding of that psychology can help to bring people together. My goal in this book is to drain some of the heat, anger, and divisiveness out of these topics and replace them with awe, wonder, and curiosity. We are downright lucky that we evolved this complex moral psychology that allowed our species to burst out of the forests and the savannas and into the delights, comforts, and extraordinary peacefulness of modern societies in just a few thousand years. My hope is that this book will make conversations about morality, politics, and religion more common, more civil, and more fun, even in mixed company. My hope is that it will help us to get along. Born to be righteous. I could have titled the book The Moral Mind to convey the sense that the human mind is designed to do morality, just as it is designed to do language, sexuality, music, and many other things described in popular books reporting the latest scientific findings. But I chose the title The Righteous Mind to convey the sense that the human nature is not just intrinsically moral. It is also intrinsically moralistic, critical, and judgmental. The word righteous comes from the Old Norse word "rightvis" and the Old English word "rightvis", both of which mean just, upright, virtuous. This meaning has been carried into the modern English words righteous and righteousness, although nowadays those words have strong religious connotations because they are usually used to translate the Hebrew word Zadok. Zadok is a common word in the Hebrew Bible, often used to describe people who act in accordance with God's wishes. But it is also an attribute of God and of God's judgment of a people, which is often harsh but always thought to be just. The linkage of righteousness and judgmentalism is captured in some modern definitions of righteous, such as arising from an outraged sense of justice, morality, or fair play. The link also appears in the term self-righteous, which means convinced of one's own righteousness, especially in contrast with the actions and beliefs of others. Narrowly moralistic and intolerant. I want to show you that obsession with righteousness, leading inevitably to self-righteousness, is the normal human condition. It is a feature of our evolutionary design, not a bug or error that crept into minds that would otherwise be objective or rational. Our righteous minds made it possible for human beings, but no other animals to produce large cooperative groups, tribes, and nations without the glue of kinship. But at the same time, our righteous minds guarantee that our cooperative groups will always be caused by moralistic strife. Some degree of conflict among groups may even be necessary for the health and the development of any society. When I was a teenager, I wished for world peace. But now I yearn for a world in which competing ideologies are kept in balance. Systems of accountability keep us all from getting away with too much, and fewer people believe that righteous ends justify violent means. Not a very romantic wish, but one that we might actually achieve. What lies ahead? This book has three parts, which you can think of as three separate books, except that each one depends on the one before it. Each part presents one major principle for moral psychology. Part 1 is about the first principle: intuitions come first, strategic reasoning second. Moral intuitions arise automatically and almost instantaneously, long before moral reasoning has a chance to get started, and those first intuitions tend to drive our later reasoning. If you think that moral reasoning is something we do to figure out the truth, you will probably be constantly frustrated by how foolish, biased, and illogical people become when they disagree with you. But if you think about moral reasoning as a skill we humans evolved to further our social agendas, to justify our own actions and to defend the teams we belong to, then things will make a lot more sense. Keep your eye on the intuitions and don't take people's moral arguments at face value. They are mostly post hoc constructions made up on the fly, crafted to advance one or more strategic objectives. The central metaphor of these 4 chapters is that the mind is divided, like a rider on an elephant, and the rider's job is to serve the elephant. The rider is our conscious reasoning, the stream of words and image of which we are fully aware. The elephant is the other 99% of our mental processes, the ones that occur outside the awareness but that actually govern most of our behavior. I developed this metaphor in my last book, The Happiness Hypothesis, where I described how the rider and the elephant work together, sometimes poorly as we stumble through life in search of a meaning and a connection. In this book, I will use the metaphor to solve puzzles such as why it seems like everyone else is a hypocrite, and why political partisans are so willing to believe outrageous lies and conspiracy theories. I will also use the metaphor to show you how you can better persuade people who seem unresponsive to reason. Part 2 is about the second principle for moral psychology, which is that there is more to morality than harm and fairness. The central metaphor of these 4 chapters is that the righteous mind is like a tongue with 6 taste receptors. Secular Western moralities are like cuisines that try to activate just 1 or 2 of these receptors, either concerns about harm and suffering, or concerns about fairness and injustice. But people have so many other powerful moral intuitions, such as those related to liberty, loyalty, authority, and sanctity. I will explain where these 6 taste receptors come from, how they form the basis of the world's many moral cuisines, and why politicians on the right have the built-in advantage when it comes to cooking meals than voters lack. Part 3 is about the third principle: morality binds and blinds. The central metaphor of these 4 chapters is that human beings are 90% chimp and 10% bee. Human nature was produced by natural selection working at two levels simultaneously. Individuals compete with individuals within every group, and we are the descendants of primates who excelled at that competition. This gives us the ugly side of our nature, the one that is usually featured in books about our evolutionary origins. We are indeed selfish hypocrites, so skilled at putting on a show of virtue that we fool even ourselves. But human nature was also shaped as groups competed with other groups. As Darwin said long ago, the most cohesive and cooperative groups generally beat the groups of selfish individualists. Darwin's ideas about group selection fell out of favor in the 1960s, but recent discoveries are putting his ideas back into play, and the implications are profound. We are not always selfish hypocrites. We also have the ability, under special circumstances, to shut down our petty selves and become like cells in a larger body, or like bees in a hive, working for the good of the group. These experiences are often among the most cherished of our lives. Although our heavishness can blind us to other moral concerns, our be-like natural facilities altruism, heroism, war, and genocide. Once you see our righteous minds as primate minds with a heavish overlay, you get a whole new perspective on morality, politics, and religion. I will show that our higher nature allows us to be profoundly altruistic, but that altruism is mostly aimed at members of our own people, our own groups. I will show that religion is probably an evolutionary adaptation for banding groups together and helping them to create communities with a shared morality. It's not a virus or a parasite, as some scientists have argued in recent years. And I will use this perspective to explain why some people are conservative, others are liberal or progressive, and still others become libertarians. People bind themselves into political teams that share moral narratives. Once they accept a particular narrative, they become blind to alternative moral worlds. A note on terminology. In the United States, the word liberal refers to progressive or left-wing politics, and I will use the word in this sense. But in Europe and elsewhere, the word liberal is truer to its original meaning, value liberty above all else, including in economic activities. When Europeans use the word liberal, they often mean something more like an American term libertarian, which cannot be placed easily on the left-right spectrum. Readers from outside the United States may want to swap in the words progressive or left-wing whenever I say liberal. In the coming chapters, I will draw on the latest research in neuroscience, genetics, social psychology, and evolutionary modeling. But the take-home message of the book is ancient. It is the realization that we are all self-righteous hypocrites. In Bible, Matthew 7:3-5, it says, why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye, but do not notice the log in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye. Enlightenment or wisdom, if you prefer, requires us all to take the logs out of our own eyes and then escape from our ceaseless, petty, and divisive moralism. As the 18th century Chinese Zen master Sun Tzu wrote, Senzi. I don't know who this Senzi is. Um, the perfect way is only difficult. For those who pick and choose, do not like, do not dislike, all will then be clear. Make a hairbreadth difference, and heaven and earth are set apart. If you wanted to choose to stand clear before you, never be for or against. The struggle between for and against is the mind's worst disease. I'm not saying we should live our lives like a Sun. In fact, I believe that a world without moralism, gossip, and judgment would quickly decay into chaos. But if we want to understand ourselves, our divisions, our limits, and our potentials, we need to step back, drop the moralism, apply some moral psychology, and analyze the game we are all playing. Let us now examine the psychology of this struggle between for and against. It is the struggle that plays out in each of our righteous minds and among all of our righteous groups.